The elevator had come and I just let it go, but I remember her saying something effective like, oh, you're gonna miss your elevator. I was like, oh, don't worry, I'll just catch the next one. I don't want to say she's slow on the uptake at some of these things, but sometimes she needs a very hard assurance that, yes, I am indeed flirting with you.
Another week, another love story. I'm Andrea Gunning.
And I'm Ben Fetterman.
And you're listening to Dating Diaries, questions and confessions.
Dre, do you feel like it always takes one person to kind of take the lead to spark a relationship?
Ultimately, someone has to make the first move. And this week, we've got a story about two people who circled each other for months.
I mean, we all know that dance, right? Are you interested in me? Am I interested in you? I know where I stand. Where the hell do you stand? Like, someone's got to make that first intentional move to say, I'm into you.
Ugh, nothing like a good crush. But it is a delicate dance.
First name's Stacie, and I am from Chicago. I'm 34. Have always professionally been pretty driven, so spent most of my 20s somewhat dating and in random relationships, but definitely more confident and focused on my professional career. I struggled personally with being one of the last ones of my friends to get married. I had a lot of friends who had found their person.
Stacie was feeling like it was never going to happen. She was meeting people, but none of them were destined to be her person.
I struggled and maybe got into some relationships with people who weren't the best fit for me, and I wasn't the right fit for them.
Especially the last one she was with.
That was one of those relationships where it was, in hindsight, pretty toxic. You know, periods of, dating, breaking up, that kind of thing.
And for all the confidence she had with work, it didn't necessarily translate to confidence in her romantic life.
I went to, all girls Catholic schools growing up. Maybe the a little bit more chubby girl in high school, right? I didn't have my first kiss till I was 17. Didn't really have my first relationship until I was in college when I was 20. And so I think there was a lack of confidence in putting myself out there. And so I definitely was more of the person that wasn't going to make the first move naturally.
Stacie went on dating apps, but she was never a fan.
When I would get in front of the apps, I would just get this sort of paralyzing kind of feeling. I had somebody who I ended up meeting for a drink once, and then they asked me to send them a photo in workout clothes, to which I sent a photo of Richard Simmons.
While that guy was sweating to the oldies, Stacie was hoping for a more old-fashioned meeting.
I was looking at new buildings. I found this one and a lot of, professionals around the same age. So I was like, I'm going to pick this one. Hopefully I'll meet some cute guy organically. And turns out within the first couple weeks, I actually had an IKEA furniture delivery coming. They came super early, way earlier than I expected them to. And so I'm still in my pajamas, no makeup on, early morning, rushing out there to meet them at the elevator. And a guy approaches and says hello. And I look over. This handsome guy, says hi. We make small talk a little bit. He says to me, as if you need help putting together your furniture, I'm in apartment 1011. Never got his name, so I started referring to him as the cute neighbor. Because I lived in apartment 1008, he was in 1011. So we literally were 2 doors down from each other.
Can't get any more convenient than that.
I didn't even think about, is he flirting, right? I naturally went to, maybe this is just the friendly neighbor who is willing to help me with my IKEA furniture.
No one just offers to put together IKEA furniture, Stacie. And her friends, well, they suspected that there was more going on.
My girlfriends would say, what about that cute neighbor guy? Because we would run into him in the elevator and he would say, oh, you guys look nice. Where are you going? And, my friend would say, go after this guy.
But making the first move just wasn't Stacie's MO.
So I had always only called him the cute neighbor because my friend had helped me coin that term just to ourselves. We would run into each other. It was oftentimes just riding the elevator from the 10th floor, which was where we lived, to the first floor. And there was always this chemistry, like the witty banter that you kind of feel, but it wouldn't really last that long. And so I never really knew, again, is he flirting or not flirting? I mean, my intuition told me that, my gut told me that, but I also wasn't at that point willing or ready to make a move. I needed some sort of blatant sign for me to say, okay, I'm willing to put myself out there.
And the universe delivered one.
I remember it was the day before lockdown. I had run downstairs and gotten my, giant Chipotle order because I was ready to settle into a night of something on Netflix. And so I come walking up the stairs and he was at the elevator about to go for a run. And so we struck up a conversation probably about the pandemic. I couldn't remember his name. That I said, hey, what's your name? And he said, I can't believe you don't remember, something like that. To which I then, hid the name on my Chipotle order and said, well, like you remember mine. And he said, I just call you the cute girl that lives on my floor. And so I remember there were two things that made it blatantly obvious, right?
Welcome back, Captain Obvious.
That he was flirting. And that was one of them. The other thing was the elevator had actually come and he had let it go and said, oh, I'll just take the next one so he could keep chatting with me. So it was those two things that I was like, okay, this guy definitely is interested. And so that was when somehow in the conversation, I made a comment like, I just got a puzzle. Like, you should come over and do a puzzle and have a drink sometime.
The problem is, when is sometime?
And so it was at that point that I was like, you know what? We talked about getting a drink and a puzzle. I'm just going to go knock on his door. It's like a Saturday night. And I did. And he answered right away. And he said, can you give me a couple minutes and I'll be right over? I immediately turned bright red. I went back to my apartment and I'm like fanning myself from the anxiety of actually making the first move for the first time in my life. He came over that night and we talked for 5 hours. That was, about everything, just, values. And we just had so many things in common, which was really cool. And we shared our first kiss as, we were ending the night. We had a kiss. I asked if I could kiss him.
So, what is cute neighbor guy like? Oh, and his name is Alex, by the way. Alex.
He's very, strong and steady, patient, not very emotional, even-keeled. He is super funny, which is a big one, witty and funny. He's very intelligent and in ways that I'm not. Super handsome. Yeah. We just naturally had conversations that people typically don't have in the first few months of dating, because a lot of times the first few months of dating are more of the exciting, let's go to a concert or, let's go to a movie, where you might talk a little bit, but then you're in an experience that doesn't, necessarily translate to getting to the heart of deep issues. Now, when the pandemic's over, we're going to have to do the reverse and have all the fun experiences. And I joke around and say, you're going to have to woo me again.
And how has it been since puzzle night?
I think we ended up hanging out again a couple days later, and we've literally spent every single day together since then. Being in your 30s, right, where all your friends have sort of found their significant others, I would have days where I would be really hard on myself and I would be crying, and I'd be like, when am I going to find somebody? And when is it my turn? And I remember having conversations with my mother, and my mom would say, it's going to happen to you. And when it does, it's going to happen really fast. And of course, at that moment in time, I'm like, you're my mom. Of course, you're going to say that. But now I'm like, oh my God, you were right. And she loves to tell me that she was right. I never thought I would find my person in the middle of a pandemic.
So often on Dating Diaries, we only get to hear one side of the story. But this week, we get the luxury of hearing the other side. We get to hear from Alex, the neighbor 2 doors down.
Even though Stacie has to concede, her mom was right. Alex is so worth it.
My name's Alex Morton.
So we've heard. The neighbor. Okay, Alex, let's hear your story.
I went to a small school, played D3 football there for a little bit, which was fun. Graduated, just kind of worked around Chicagoland. Been living downtown for 10 or 12 years or so now. So I've worked for McDonald's corporate.
Great fries. So far, so good. Wait, he said corporate.
Our group is really responsible for trying to make the lives easier for people behind the scenes who make your food.
And when did he first notice Stacie?
I remember she was in the elevator, and I remember very specifically being like, okay, this girl is very, very beautiful, but you do not want to be the creep that lives 2 doors down and hits on her for 2 minutes.
So Alex chose to go easy.
So I'm like, okay, just be the friendly neighbor, offer to help if she needs anything, but also very aware of don't be the weird neighbor guy at the same time.
But they live on the same floor.
We both lived on the same wing of the elevator bank. So she was a little bit closer to the elevator.
Alex definitely noticed her, but wasn't rushing over there.
No, it wasn't any of those cheesy love at first sight type of movie things, but it was a refreshingly nice interaction to walk away from. I was somewhat conflicted because I was yeah, she is beautiful and she seems super nice. And I would love getting to know her. Then I was kind of secretly in the back of my head, okay, probably can play a little bit long game here.
That was his plan, the long game, which meant Stacie might be the one to make it happen.
It was a little bit of kind of the same meeting place over and over again, right? It was, okay, we're gonna run into each other at the elevator. There was a couple times I saw her going out with her friends.
So he was interested, but he was being really subtle. And she wasn't sure.
I remember there was one time that she was in the elevator with her friend, and they were both obviously dressed up to be going out for the night. And I said something very casually oh, you two look very nice.
He was finally putting something into the universe.
Stacie was oh yeah, we're going here, being there, and then going separate ways.
This could potentially be a long, long game, Alex.
I was always secretly trying to impress her. There was another time where she told me she was going out, and I said, oh yeah, I'm going out to meet up with my friends too, even though I was walking down the street to pick up barbecue and come home.
Secretly is the operative word here. Pretending that he had something going on when he was really just staying in alone.
And then I was oh no, I hope she doesn't forget her phone and have to come back, and then we meet back in the elevator and I'm got a bag of takeout in my hand and then look like a really sad person.
Alex was confusing. He was trying so hard not to be a creepy neighbor, but too subtle for Stacie to know if he was really interested.
I didn't know because here I am gawking at her in the elevator. I was too concentrated on trying to flirt with her in such a nonchalant way that would not come off as creepy neighborly.
And he was at the point of his life that he was ready for someone like Stacie. Fun, stable, serious, adorable.
I feel I was kind of approaching the stage where I could see the idea of getting into something more serious soon. For me, in dating in general, it's always been so much easier when I'm not trying very hard.
And Alex, you definitely nailed it.
When the universe puts it in my lap, maybe I'll be smart enough to pick it up this time.
So did the universe deliver you the one?
The one, I don't know if I'm believing the one. I think there's work to it. So I think for me, it's always been about finding the one that's worth doing the work to kind of keep that going.
And he found that in Stacie.
I think that the lockdown in Chicago had been announced, right? It was the 2 days where everybody was selling out toilet paper and fighting in supermarkets and stuff, right? And I was okay, I'm gonna go for a quick run after work. Here I am waiting for that. I push the button and Stacie comes out the door from the stairs. So we're just doing our quick usual, just kind of starting where it left off.
And Alex really started to make it obvious.
The elevator had come and I just let it go, but I remember her saying something effective oh, you're gonna miss your elevator. I was oh, don't worry, I'll just catch the next one. I don't want to say she's slow on the uptake at some of these things, but sometimes she needs a very hard assurance that yes, I am indeed flirting with you.
And then a bit of reality slammed him pretty hard.
At some point in this exchange, she goes, I'm sorry, what's your name again? I pretended to be very upset, like the very like, oh, I'm so hurt that you wouldn't like remember my name.
But he recovered perfectly.
And she said, oh, wait, well, if you're so upset, what's my name? And I said, oh, I just call you the cute girl that lives on my floor. You know, a big smile on her face. And it was kind of like, okay, yes, we are really actually flirting now.
And they finally talked about getting together. And you know that story. Some of it.
It was just after, working hours. Well, listen, like there's a knock on the door. So I whip on her shirt because I had a feeling it was her. She's like, hey, do you want to come over for a drink and do a puzzle or whatever? One
thing they both agree on, it was a great night.
I came over here for a puzzle. There better be puzzle. But we quickly abandoned that and kind of moved over to like the couch. And then it ended up being, I think you kind of like have those nights where it's like all of a sudden you realize, hey, a lot clicks with this person. We had a really good connection. It's amazing how different our personalities are, but like how aligned we are on like certain like goal things in terms of like her being very career driven and can't really script a better first real interaction with somebody, talk about everything and talk about nothing at the same time.
But Alex, he was still worried about being the creepy neighbor, even after being invited over.
Obviously, I liked her, and obviously I was attracted to her, but I was very worried about being a weird neighbor. And yes, she made the first move. And maybe that's all I'll say about that.
So he got over that.
Eventually we started doing this kind of like, hey, I'm done with work, you're done with work, let's debrief on the day. I'd walk over to her place, and then that would like steadily turn into, okay, yeah, like I'll make dinner tonight, and then we'll like do a night in or watch a movie later. We were probably doing this either every other day or maybe even every day.
And now with the world opening up, it's like starting again.
I have a partner to go do these fun things that, I like doing around the city already.
And it feels really good.
It's amazing how much of a difference a relationship is when you're with someone who you're like, yeah, this person cares about me and the goals that I have and also the goals we kind of have together. I think that to me is one of like the big differences.
Now thinking about it, this had to happen. They both saw each other and got that feeling.
I mean, I'm always been cute. I knew that. I didn't hear about the stories about being called cute neighbor until much later. It is interesting that we both kind of have the same nickname for each other, right? She was telling people I was cute neighbor. We both know we're moving fast and being like a little bit crazy. We both know. As long as I'm not the only one that thinks it's a little bit crazy that we moved in together after like dating less than a year and just like 6 months. As long as I'm not the only one that like thinks this is crazy, then we're good.
A little luck, some fate, good flirting from Alex, and Stacie moving it forward. And here we are.
Right, we're both on the same crazy page. Because we would just look at each other and be like, I can't believe I live with a girl. She'd be like, I know, I can't believe I live with a boy.
We usually talk about proximity being a bitch. These two have found a way to make it work.
So I'll start with Stacie. I really felt for her. I know what it feels like to sit back and say, when is this going to happen for me? Like sometimes your thoughts are your toughest critic and your biggest bully. And I totally know what that's like. I've been there. So when she said that, like I just felt it in my heart. And I've definitely been that friend that says, when your time comes, it's going to happen quickly. Because I have other girlfriends that feel this way too. But when you're on the receiving end of that advice, just like Stacie was on that receiving end of her mom's advice, like it's hard to actually trust in that. And it takes a lot of faith to just be like, okay, when it will happen for me, it'll happen for me. But I've been in that moment, when it's like Sunday night, you're ending your weekend and you're sitting in your bathtub, your bubble tubby, and you're thinking about another weekend goes by, another opportunity to meet someone, and I'm still alone. Like that can be hard and it can be really lonely.
Yeah. And I mean, usually people who are in relationships say that thing. It's like easy for you to say. Easy for you to say. You and Brad look awesome. Like you're having a good time.
Yep.
So easy for you to say, I'm still here single. I mean, what I'll also say is moms usually do know best. Moms do have an intuition.
She was right.
This is a Dating Diaries first. We've spent 2 seasons talking about how we don't get the benefit of seeing the other side. We only get one side of the story. We don't know what the other person was thinking. The lesson here is look at what's going through two people's heads to make it this impossible to actually meet up and spark a connection. And there are just so many instances where this could have been a misconnection.
Think about how in their own head they are and have the luxury of proximity and opportunity on their side. Look, I get that it's a risk. Like, I understand.
But the point is, he would have gone a year and a half to avoid being the creepy neighbor, to know for sure that she was interested in his pursuit. I think that's a mistake because, what's the worst thing that could happen? You get evicted. You just have to evict yourself and leave, and there are more buildings in Chicago.
Or just committing to take the stairs, And at least you're getting good cardio out of it. But at the end of the day, it's like, who fucking cares? Look, a guy that I went on a few dates with that didn't end fantastic, he now lives in my neighborhood. I see him when I walk my dog. We're both adults about it. Like, I'm not going to go out of my way to say hi. We have no connection anymore. He's getting in his car, wave hello, move on with your life. It's just kind of like you build up all these worst case scenarios and assume worst case scenarios as opposed to living in the moment and going with your gut.
I think that's the key of this lesson. If you're really feeling a connection, there's a strong likelihood the person on the other side of that interaction is feeling something similar. And unless you take that leap, there's a likelihood that that's going to pass you by.
Would you make the first move? Like back in the day when you were on the dating scene, like what was...
I've certainly made the first move before. However, my wife does like to brag that she made the first move. Now, granted, this was early days of social media. I did write on her wall first. For all of those who remember Facebook back in the day, you did actually post on someone's wall. There was no messenger. There was no DM. You didn't slip into someone's DMs. You wrote on their wall. So I did publicly say, hey, what's up? We're going to the same college, which basically was like, I think you're cute. I want to start a conversation.
Oh, wow. Everyone I've ever seriously dated, I made the first move.
I think a girl making a first move is very sexy. You're just stating your claim, put your intentions out and say, I'm into you. Where do you stand?
I can't handle the anticipatory anxiety of like, will this go or will this not go? Because I'm kind of the school of thought of like, let me rip this Band-Aid off. It's either going to work out or it's not. And I rather know sooner than later if it's going anywhere. Because I know people that will pine over someone for a year.
And do nothing about it.
I'm like, what a waste of mental space. I'm all about the first move of like initiating interest, but also even in terms of like intimate interest, like a first kiss, I can't help myself because I get too anxious. My move is always to say, can I kiss you or can you kiss me?
You're both probably thinking the same thing, but someone's got to make the first chess move.
Yeah, I wish them the best. I hope they keep us updated.
Yeah, we might get another marriage invitation.
Yo, Chicago's my favorite city.
We're here for it. I would go to Chicago. I've never been to Chicago.
If you've been stalking your neighbor, just kidding, Alex. We want to hear all about it. Please write to us. We read all of your emails. You can write to us at datingdiariespod@gmail.com. That's datingdiariespod@gmail.com. We love hearing your stories.
And hit us up on social at Dating Diaries QC. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Tell us your story however you want. We're here for it.
And until next week, stay safe out there, guys. This podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Andrea Gunning. Executive produced by Nancy Glass, Ben Fetterman, and Carrie Hartman. Produced by Julie Clark. Associate producers include Megan Paisley and Kristen Malcurie. Edited by Mac Daggett and Matt Delvecchio. Special thanks to Natalie Thomas. Music by Mybe Music. Some names have been changed to protect privacy.